Hello YouTube, Dave here again. So I'm going to be flipping through and sharing my thoughts on the Starfinder Starship Operations Manual. This is one of the latest offerings for the Starfinder role-playing game, and it's published by Paizo themselves. Paizo actually did send this to me for the purpose of doing this review, so I do want to thank them for that. However, they are not influencing the review, they are not dictating what's said in it or pre-screening it or anything like that. So the opinions that I express in this video are going to be my own. Once I saw that this was listed as an upcoming product, I got really excited because I've always wanted a book focused on starships and starship combat for the Starfinder role-playing game. I find that the starship combat is interesting, but it's one of those things that I feel gets sort of forgotten about or left out of a lot of games. So it'll be interesting to see sort of what they do to address or to make starship combat a little bit more interesting, or some of the options that they have in this book. So taking a look at the back here. So it says, your odds of surviving the galaxy threats are only as good as your starship. The Starship Operations Manual powers up your starship with exciting new options, including new armaments like plasma mines, ramming prows, orbital lasers, electronic countermeasures, alternate armor and starship systems like deflector shields, virtual intelligence and holographic mantles, ways for your PCs to pilot a squadron of starships or direct a massive armada as commanding officers, details for dozens of starship manufacturers, and stats for the most influential starship designs, advice and tools for GMs building a starship campaign. The retail price for this is $39.99 US. I want to say that the Canadian price is probably around $49.99. And it's usually about $10 more for these books. I could be wrong in that. It does depend on the price that your local retailer sells them at, but I believe this would be regularly about a $49.99 book if you're buying it in Canada. So we're just going to flip through it here first, sort of look at some of the contents. I'm not going to go through everything super in-depth in this video. I may always circle back and look at some of the options of a little bit more detail later on. So I'm just going to leave it open for that in this video, but this is, again, sort of an overview of what's in here. So let's get right into it, shall we? Oh, we have our table of contents. So the first chapter is about building starships, interstellar travel, weapons, alternate armor, special materials, starship systems, and super colossal ships. So that's something I'm kind of interested in seeing. Then we have starship combat, so rules on boarding, critical effects, starship chases, additional options, starships in atmosphere, squadron combat, and armada combat. Chapter 3, we have manufacturers, reading starship stat blocks and new ships, and then we have information for running starship-based campaigns. So again, kind of interesting stuff here. So it's really nice artwork in this book. I've always loved the Starfinder art style. I think it's just always worked really, really well. So one of the interesting things about this book that it sort of introduces is it introduces alternate versions of engines that can be used, or not engines necessarily, but interstellar travel options that may be related to particular faiths or companies or things along those lines. So we have stuff like, as you can see here, we have fold gates, shadow engines, all kinds of different things here. Now these, like I said, are provided by, or they're specific to certain organizations. So for example, under special properties, the Archon drive is restricted to the Church of Imode and the Knights of Golarion. So these are sort of just different options you can use to spice up or flavor your campaign, or to give benefits to players that may be part of these organizations. So again, kind of cool stuff to have there. It's just a nice little flavor thing to have some of these different options. And then we've got different types of weapons here. So there's new weapon properties that are added, such as anchoring, which basically tethers two ships together for the purpose of boarding, which is something that is talked about in this book as well. There's automated weapons. There are hacking weapons, mines, intimidating weapons. So all kinds of different things that we can have here. Orbital weapon systems. So yeah, a lot of different options there. We have like ramming prows if you want to do like collision course type of thing. And yeah, again, just really interesting stuff here, and a whole bunch of new weapons, damage, power units. So again, just a lot of new options for customizing your starship. And so that reminds me a lot of like the Armory book, for example. So having more options is always, great, and to have something again feel a bit more unique than some of the standard ships. So this book will do a really good job with that. We have ablative armor, so it's a sort of a new armor type that basically it provides temporary HP, so it basically absorbs damage and burns off the ablative armor before getting into the actual hull points of the ship. If you watch like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, the Defiant class ships had ablative armor. So instead of relying just on shields, they had these armors on them that would basically absorb damage and burn away before damaging major systems. So again, some cool stuff there. Fortified hulls. Different special materials that your ships can be made out of. Abyssium sounds kind of interesting. So yeah, just again, the different options there and what they provide. Starship systems, so expansion bays. So these are things you can put into your ships when you're customizing them. So we have things like an arcane mortuary. So it contains equipment that aids spellcasters in creating undead. This would be great stuff for example, like the Corpse Fleet or organizations like that. Ships from Eox. So really cool stuff there. Breaching pods. So breaching pods, you fire them at the ships basically, and you can put creatures in them. And the idea is that the pods puncture through the ship, and then the pod opens up at the point where it breaches through the hull, and the creatures can sort of pour out. So again, that can make for some very interesting combat situations, and so something like this could also really help out with like the Starship campaign options. So again, just all kinds of different things here. Cryo chambers, corpse recyclers, sounds interesting as well. Then we'll have like an auto-destruct system. Again, some beautiful artwork in here. Different interface modules, artificial intelligence, biohacks. Some new options for the different roles on the ship. So things that gunners can look into doing on their turn, on their phase, or pilots, magic officers. So again, really cool stuff there. We have some feat modules. So those are basically things that you can apply to the ship. And it tells you which phase they're used in. Virtual intelligence and different upgrades there. And then we get into these super colossal ships. So this was one of the things that I was most interested in when it came to this book. One of the issues that I've kind of had with Starfinder is that a lot of the ships just always feel really small. Now that's probably just because of a lot of like the science fiction that I grew up with had, these large starships that had, hundreds of people and 30 decks and stuff like that. But to see a lot of ships that have, 8 to 10 crew members or crew on it and stuff like that, it always felt small. So the super colossal ships is sort of an answer to that. So these are super huge. I mean, they're massive ships that have large crew sizes. So for example, just the base ship for the super colossal can have a minimum of 150 crew members up to 100,000 for maximum crews. That's a huge one. And then like the Ultranaut, which is more of like a battleship type of thing, can have anywhere from 250 to 5,000. The first time super colossal ships were actually introduced was in the final chapter of the Dead Sun's Adventure Path, and the player characters were the only sort of ship in the area that could stop them. So they couldn't fight the ship head on. What they had to do was actually board it and fight their way to the bridge, which is, sort of a really cool way to sort of cap off the campaign. But I would just love to see, again, the like super colossal ships, and even have like the player characters maybe be part of the crew of a super colossal ship. And I really like the idea of them. It fits more in lines of what I kind of want when it comes to starships in Starfinder. Now they have to have a lot of like redundant systems, like extra computer core or power cores, computer systems, and all that stuff. So like these are really massive ships, but it's kind of cool to have stuff for them here. There's not a lot of rules for them because functionally they work pretty much the same as regular starships. It's just a matter of all the different systems that you have to have and like the minimum requirement for a power core and stuff like that. That's sort of the exception to the general rules. But yeah, again, it's just really cool to see super colossal ships in here. All right, and then we get into our Starship combat section. So we have information on boarding. Boarding can be handled in one of two ways. You can turn it into a combat situation involving the player characters directly, if they want to be involved in repelling the boarding crew, or you can have it sort of done in a somewhat automated way. So your ship would have basically like a security rating or security value to it, which can be used to determine if the boarding attack succeeds or fails. And if you could also be on the other end of that. You could be like a boarding crew, going on to another ship. So again, it's just kind of interesting, a scenario and something that I would definitely use to make Starship combat a little bit more interesting. And then we have critical effects. So this is actually probably, in my opinion, the best section of this book. It's not very big, but what's great about it is it gives you effects, bonuses for rolling natural 20s on your various turns. So, like for example, with the gunner, if you roll a critical, then you get this like extra damage or bypasses. There's different things you can do with that, but we have it for like the captain's actions, the chief mate, which is sort of a floating member of the crew that can assist with different other, phases like engineering or pilot or what have you. So there's just all the different rules for rolling natural 20s for the various actions that the characters can take during their phases for the combat situations. I really like this section here. I think this is great. I'd love to see more, and I'm sure that these things will be expanded as time goes on. You seem to add new actions or new phases or new crew types to the books. For example, the original core rulebook didn't have like a magic officer or the chief mate, so that was something that was added later. But again, this is probably one of the best sections here. So if you roll a natural 20 on your checks, then you can do these certain abilities or get the benefits that you choose from the list. So again, really awesome stuff there. Then we have Starship chases. So chase is another staple of, like Starship combat, and the ship's trying to get away and you're trying to chase it down. Or if you're trying to get away and someone's trying to chase you down, it gives you all the rules for that. It functions similarly enough to like the Pathfinder version of chases, where you have a certain number of obstacles that you have to overcome within a certain number of rounds, depending on if you're being chased or the chasing, or if it's just two people racing or two ships racing each other. But it is, again, another nice option to have available to you to make some of these scenarios a little bit more interesting. So, again, cool stuff there. Additional Starship options, so the crew locations, orbital drops, so if you wanted to do stuff like that, single occupant drop pods, personal drop pods, optional drops without a pod, which could be a little bit hairy, damage and repair, so hull ruptures. Again, different things that you'd want to look into to make the combat again just feel a little bit more dynamic or alive. And so these are again another great section of the book to really look into. Like power core breaches, aborting like self-destruct sequences, or avoiding meltdowns. So again, just some really cool stuff. Atmospheric decompression. Rules for losing cargo in the event of atmospheric decompression. So just a lot of interesting stuff here to look into. And then we have starships in atmosphere, so including how friction from the atmosphere will affect the ships and damaging them in different storms or environments that they could fly through. That can adversely affect the ship as well. And then we get into our squadron combat. And after that, I believe we have our armada combat. So these are just options to again, just sort of provide a greater sense of scale to your Starship combat. So they do function very similar in a lot of ways to the standard Starship combat. So one of the things you do is you just sort of track um, you track the squadron or the armada stats the way that you would a normal starship, and different things might modify it, or there's different ways to apply or to have damage sort of effect overall. But again, it's just something that I think would be, this is sort of like squadron space combat. I think would be a very interesting sort of like mid campaign thing involving like if you're in a war type scenario. So I think this could be a lot of fun. But honestly, I prefer the armada combat. So this is where you have massive armies facing off against one another, and the characters basically take the role of commanders, influencing the armadas or the fleets attacks and sort of coordinating their moves and everything. So this is the one that I think is the one that I'm most interested in actually applying to a campaign, and this would make for a very great climactic battle type of scenario. Where you're having the starship, like just these massive armies battling each other. So again, you track things very similarly to the way that you would with regular ships. Armada sort of move sort of in tandem, so you would just track the movement of the armada versus individual ships. And you do the same thing for combat and shield points, stuff like that. Shields do automatically recharge as you're going through the armada combat. I think it's just sort of to simulate the crews diverting power and taking some of those options for you, and just having it applied automatically rather than trying to track it for each individual ship. But this is one that again I'd really like to try out. So there's also morale rules for routing the enemy if they lose too much of their fleet, or for your fleet's morale breaking if you lose too many of your ships. So again, just a really cool set of options there. Chapter 3 is all about starships, and we have manufacturers. Now, of course, you also have a fluffy Skittermander there. But the cool thing about manufacturers is manufacturers have their particular models of ships that they're known for, but they can also have these special abilities or special options that you can have. So, for example, they may be able to have like extra weapons if they're known for being a battle or war based or military based company designing the ships. They may have better maneuverability than other ships from other companies. There's like just all kinds of different little benefits to having an actual the actually using the actual manufacturer. So again, this is something that I would highly recommend, and it does set the stage for like corporate espionage kind of style campaigns where you could have characters try to infiltrate one of these corporations and to steal some of their secrets so that they may try to unlock some of their specialties. So I kind of like that, just having the different businesses in here as well. Again, it just really sort of fleshes things out, and it makes sense that different companies would be better at certain things than others. So again, really cool stuff there. And then we just get into some ready-made ships for you. So these are awesome for if you're your group to have a ship, but you don't necessarily, or they don't necessarily want to go through the process of trying to piece together everything. Themselves, if they just want something that they can inherit, then this is awesome for that. So, and there's a ton of ships in here, and a lot of really cool designs overall. This one kind of reminds me of the R-Wing a little bit from Star Fox, and I think that's pretty awesome. So you get all kinds of different ships in here. Again, some really interesting and neat designs. Actually, I really like that one. Even though it's a small shuttle, it looks like that's a small shuttle. Huh. Looks like it should be a much larger vehicle, but that's fine. It still looks really cool. Again, I love the ship designs here. The Death's Head's Charon for like the Corpse Fleet. Again, I love the Corpse Fleet designs as well. They're just like so just menacing looking. This awesome stuff there. That one looks kind of like a bug, almost like a dragonfly type of thing. And I believe in here as well, it might be in the campaign section, but there's also like some creatures, like space creatures, that you can use as well, that are like Starship scale sized. And here we got some super colossal ships here as well. The Sovereign Dominator looks really cool. And then we have, so here we go. Yeah, so for the campaigns, we actually have information on building Starship scale creatures. So if you want to create your own, you can certainly do that. And it gives you the different things you can apply. Like if you want to make a giant space dragon, you can do that, or a magical beast, aberrations, constructs, just lots of great stuff. And what it gives you is by tier, from all the way from tier 1/4 all the way up to 20. It gives you like their armor class, target lock, their hull points, and like shield points, and CT critical threshold. So if critical threshold, if you take that much damage to your hull points at once in one attack, then you suffer a critical effect, which can cause some of your ship's systems to malfunction. So that gives you all that information there, as well as their skill bonuses, gunnery bonuses, what their high weapon damage is and what their low weapon damage is. So again, very useful chart for creating these creatures. As also, these charts are always also great for improvisation. So if you just decide that your characters are traveling from one point, like point A to point B, and you, instead of wanting to gloss over it, you could just have them fight like a giant space dragon, and then you can throw together the stats. Again, awesome stuff there. So I absolutely love these options. And then we get special abilities for the creatures, like Death Throws or Cunning Predator, Fearsome. And then we have some examples here. So again, just really cool stuff. And then hazards, so asteroids and debris, stellar phenomenon, things like wormholes, radiation, drift phenomena. So if you're going through the drift, and then we get designing Starship encounters. So different options there, different structures you can look at, cinematic encounters, hazards and terrain and space, environmental storytelling. So again, another great section for making space combat a little bit more dynamic, I guess you could say. And then we just have some adventure seeds for Starship-based campaigns. So these are just some ideas that you can use to either build a campaign around, or an adventure around, or even maybe just an encounter around. But again, it's just always great to have some stuff like that as a starting point. Anyway, so even as someone who's been running RPGs for years and years, I love seeing stuff like this, because it can spark your imagination. It can sort of give you really something to build off of. So yeah, some awesome stuff there. Some campaign arcs. So these are sort of longer term storyline options you may want to look into. Again, awesome stuff. Now we just get into our appendix and our sheets. So our Starship sheets. And then we have Squadron information. And then armada sheets here as well. So again, just really, really cool stuff. So that was my flip through of the Starfinder Starship Operations Manual. So what do I think of this book, having spent some time reading through it? Number one thing that I've had problems with Starfinder in the past, especially when it came to Starship combat, was that while it's a very interesting concept and the rules for it were a very solid foundation, Starship combat always felt a little bit flat. At least in my limited experiences running it. I haven't had a chance to run a ton of Starship combats, but the ones that I've run have gone one of two ways. They were either over incredibly quickly, or they dragged on for a very long time. I had one Starship encounter take like 2.5 hours, and it felt like it took more than 2.5 hours to get through. It's just everyone was missing, their roles were terrible, myself as the game master, the player's role. So it just felt like it was taking forever. And it would have been nice to have had some different options or some different ideas to throw into the combat to sort of spice things up. And that's what this book does really, really well. In general, just having more options available to you is always a great thing. So all the like different weapon systems that you can have, or different weapon types that are in here, but just things like the anchoring weapons or breaching pods, stuff like that. It just adds another large dimension to this to the system. So, for example, in that 2.5 hour space combat that I had, one of the things that may have livened it up a little bit could have been having a breaching pod shot at the party's ship, and having the players have to switch from Starship combat mode into like regular character combat mode as they try to repel the border. So I think something like that, would have really helped in that situation. And now going forward, that is an option that I have. But things like, melee weapons on the ships just provide sort of an interesting twist on things, or, rules for ramming ships, stuff like that. So, there's a lot of great options in here. And I think it does a really good job of just livening up Starship combat. Having the critical rules for the different crew actions is awesome, because whenever you have like those critical type of effects, I always find that the players are more engaged and more, paying more attention to everyone's dice rolls, because they want to see that natural 20. I would have honestly liked to have seen critical fumble rules as well. But that's something that could always happen, later on. I just like having both, right? I like having, the natural 20s and the natural ones have these added effects, because I've found in my experiences that having those, again, just, keeps everybody glued to what's going on, and keeping their attention, which can be difficult these days. So, that's really great from that perspective. I love the concept of the corporations as well, as, in the different types of interstellar drive. There are things that you may not necessarily use a lot, but just having that stuff to throw into your campaigns here or there just makes it feel a little bit more organic or alive, I guess you could say. Because it makes sense that a company that's used to manufacturing warships would be better at making use of armor for weapons, or for a ship, like having the better armor ratings or hull points, or having more powerful weapon systems, or being able to fit extra weapon systems on the ships that other manufacturers producing a similar style of ship wouldn't be able to do. So I really like that idea. Squadron combat is again a nice little addition to the system as well. But I love armada combat. Like that's the one that I really want to try out, because to me it just seems like the big climactic battle at the end of the campaign, and I just really want to see that utilized, or I shouldn't say see it. I want to personally utilize that as a way of closing out a campaign, or at least closing out the Starship-based combats of a campaign, and then maybe switching to the player characters doing stuff in like as just the characters. There's all kinds of different things that you can certainly look at when it comes to the options here. But overall, this does an excellent job of just breathing fresh life into the Starship combat system, which truthfully, I think that Starfinder needed. Because it was something that I kind of started moving away from in the Starfinder games that I was running. But this is something that is going to fix that for me, I think. And again, just having the new options is fantastic. So overall, I really do recommend this for game masters looking to run the Starfinder role playing game. Is something that makes space combat just so much more involved, or more interesting, or just the different things that you can finally have available to you without having to try to house rule everything yourself, which can be a daunting task. So yeah, it's great. The campaign seeds and the campaign arc ideas are also great for just sparking someone's imagination. So stuff like that is also always very welcome in these books. And yeah, I think there's just a lot of great stuff in here. And definitely check it out if you are game mastering the Starfinder role-playing game, because Paizo did, in my opinion, a really fantastic job with this. So, kudos to them, and again, thank you to Paizo for sending this out to me. This was one of the books that I've been most anticipating from the moment I first picked up the Starfinder core rulebook. So, yeah, they did a great job in my opinion. So check it out. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you've picked this book up for yourself, if you've used any of the ideas in here in your campaigns. Have you had armada battles or squadron battles? Have you done, have ships tried to ram each other or use the like the harpooning weapons to tether ships together? Just let me know in the comments below if you've been able to get some use out of this book. So thank you everyone for taking the time to watch this. It means the world to me, and I will see you all next time. Take care.